It always starts with something simple, a knock. Maybe at the front door, maybe from the walls, maybe beneath the floorboards. You brush it off. A pipe, an animal, the wind. But then it happens again, at the same time, in the same rhythm, night after night. And suddenly you realize the knocking isn't coming from the house. It brought itself into it. The stories you're about to hear are not about bumps in the night. They're about something far worse, knocks that found a way in and never really left. Story 1. The triple knock in the motel room. It was supposed to be a quick overnight stay, just one night in a small-town motel off Route 46. The kind of place with dim neon lights that flickered more than they glowed, and a gravel parking lot that crunched loudly beneath your tires. Mark was on his way back from visiting his brother in Colorado, and by the time he hit this part of Utah, it was already after 10 p.m., and he was too exhausted to keep driving. The front desk was inside a small glass booth where a disinterested woman in her late 50s handed him a key without much more than a glance. Room 7, she said, the only room left. She didn't explain why half the motel looked empty, if that was true. Mark took the key, drove to the room, and carried his bag in. It was what he expected. Stained carpet, an old TV bolted the dresser, the lingering smell of cleaning fluid trying and failing to cover up years of cigarette smoke. The bed looked clean enough, and the lock on the door worked. That was all he needed. He showered, watched a little late-night TV, and then settled into bed with his phone. At exactly 12:03 a.m., as he was scrolling through a news app, it happened. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Not loud, but unmistakable. They came from the door. Mark sat up straight. He wasn't expecting anyone, and no one should have known which room he was in. He stayed quiet, listening. Nothing followed the knocks. No footsteps, no voices. Just the hum of the air conditioner and the occasional pop of the cooling pipes. He waited a minute, then got out of bed and looked through the peephole. No one was there. He opened the door slowly and peeked out into the empty parking lot. The gravel was undisturbed. Not even a breeze. Weird, he thought. Maybe someone had the wrong room, drunk or confused. It happened. He went back inside, locked the door, and turned off the lights. The room was quiet, almost too quiet. He lay there staring at the ceiling for a while, waiting to drift off. Knock, knock, knock. He sat bolt upright again. This time it came from the wall, the one behind the bed, not the door. 3 slow knocks, spaced exactly the same way as before. He pressed his ear to the wall. Nothing. No voices. No movement. Now he was officially unsettled. The motel was 1 story. There wasn't another room on the other side of that wall. Behind it was just a stretch of overgrown grass and the woods beyond. He knew that because he parked facing that direction. He decided to ignore it. Maybe he imagined it. Maybe it was the pipes. He tried to go back to sleep. Knock, knock, knock. It came from inside the bathroom. Mark jumped out of bed, heart pounding. He grabbed the lamp from the nightstand and crept toward the bathroom. The door was half open, creaking slightly. He pushed it open with his foot and flicked the light on. Nothing. He checked the shower, the cabinet, even the ceiling tiles. Nothing. But the room felt wrong, heavy, like the air had thickened. He backed out, shut the bathroom door, and sat on the edge of the bed. He didn't sleep after that. He just sat there, every muscle tense, eyes darting between the door, the wall, the bathroom. At exactly 3:03 a.m., the knocks returned. This time they came from the ceiling. Knock, knock, knock. Louder now. More deliberate. Like whatever it was knew he was listening. He grabbed his bag, threw his stuff inside without folding anything, and bolted. He didn't even bother checking out at the front desk. He got in his car and drove for 3 hours straight until he reached a gas station just past the Nevada border. There, in the sickly fluorescent light of the bathroom mirror, he saw it. 3 bruises, faint but undeniable, in the shape of fingertips, just beneath his collarbone, over his heart. He hadn't noticed them before, hadn't felt anything. But they were there, exactly where he'd clutched his chest during the last knock. Mark told a friend about the incident a few days later. The friend laughed it off at first, until Mark mentioned the motel. Wait, was it off Route 46? Near a gas station that never has the pumps working? Mark nodded slowly. His friend went pale. My uncle used to truck out there. Stayed in that motel once. Swore he heard someone knocking from inside the walls. Said he felt watched all night. Had a seizure the next day and never drove again. Mark never returned to that stretch of road. He always took the long way around. He tried to forget it, chalk it up to exhaustion, stress, paranoia. But the knocks never really stopped. Every once in a while, he'll be lying in bed at home, lights off, phone in hand. Knock, knock, knock. Not at the door, not on the wall, but from the inside of the closet. And every time he opens it, and every time, it's empty. Story 2. The knocks beneath the floorboards. When Lydia inherited her grandmother's house in rural North Carolina, it felt like both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it meant she could finally get out of her overpriced apartment in the city. On the other, the house had been abandoned for nearly a decade. Her grandmother, a stern and deeply private woman named Ethel May, had passed away mysteriously, alone, without a will, and found by a neighbor after no one had heard from her in weeks. The house was old, 2 stories, creaky, with a wraparound porch and dark green shutters that hung askew. It sat on a patch of land choked with weeds, and the nearby woods loomed too close for comfort. But Lydia was determined. She packed her things, took time off from her freelance writing gigs, and made the move. The first few days were uneventful. Lydia spent her time cleaning, scrubbing decades of grime from the windows, and tossing out dusty furniture. Every creak of the floorboards made her jump, but she chalked it up to her nerves and the unfamiliar setting. She avoided the basement entirely. The door stuck and needed real effort to open, and she wasn't quite ready for that yet. But on the 4th night, something changed. At around 2 a.m., Lydia was jolted awake by a sound. Knock, knock, knock. It wasn't loud, but it was distinct. It didn't come from the front door or any wall. It came from beneath her bed. Heart pounding, she flicked on the lamp and peered under the frame. Nothing. The hardwood floor was clear, just dust, a few stray socks, and the baseboards. She sat in bed, trying to rationalize it. Old houses made weird noises, she reminded herself. Maybe it was just settling. The next night, the knocks came again. Same time. Knock, knock. This time, it came from under the hallway outside her room. Lydia sat upright in the dark, holding her breath, listening. Knock, knock, knock. A pause. Then again, closer. Under the floorboards. The house was calling her. The following morning, she forced open the basement door. The wooden stairs groaned under her weight as she descended into the stale, dusty air. The basement was cluttered, boxes of old books, jars of preserves long since spoiled, a rusted bicycle, but nothing that would explain the knocking. Still, she felt it. A presence. Like something just beyond her peripheral vision was watching her. She swept the basement floor and found nothing. But when she returned upstairs, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. In the hallway outside her bedroom, there was a small square of wood, slightly different in color than the rest of the floor. A trapdoor. It was old, warped, and stuck. Lydia pried at it with a screwdriver until the nails gave and it popped open. Below was a small, narrow crawl space between the floor and the basement ceiling, too tight for a person to move through easily, but deep enough to hide something. She leaned in with a flashlight. The air smelled like soil and rot. And then she saw it. Claw marks on the beams. Deep, splintered, as if someone or something had tried to scratch its way out. That night, the knocks returned. Stronger. Knock, knock, knock. They traveled, beneath the kitchen, beneath the hallway, then beneath her bedroom once more. Always 3 knocks, always evenly spaced. Lydia didn't sleep. She lay in bed with the lights on, phone in hand, debating whether to leave. But the house was hers now. She told herself she wouldn't let some weird noises drive her away. She lasted another 3 days. On the 3rd night, something changed. Knock, 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 then silence. Then a voice. Faint, female. Let me out. Lydia screamed and leapt from the bed, pressing her back to the wall. The voice had come from underneath the floor. She ran outside barefoot, the cold night air biting at her skin. The next morning, she called a local handyman to check under the house. She didn't tell him what she'd heard, just that she thought there might be an animal trapped in the crawl space. He went down and didn't come back up for 20 minutes. When he emerged, his face was pale. "There's a room under there," he said. "A little room, walled off. Looks like it used to be part of the basement, but someone sealed it up and left it hidden." Lydia's blood ran cold. The man shook his head. "There's a little bed frame in there. Shackles, like someone was kept in there." He paused. "And claw marks, everywhere." Lydia didn't ask him to elaborate. She paid him and sent him away. That night, she researched her grandmother's history. It took hours of digging through old newspaper archives, local forums, even ancestry records. She discovered something horrifying. Her grandmother had a sister, a twin, named Lillian, diagnosed with schizophrenia in the 1950s, disappeared in 1963, no obituary, no record of death, no grave. Only a mention in an old article about a missing woman last seen in the woods behind the Ethel May property. The article was vague, dismissive, mental illness, they'd said. Probably ran off. Lydia knew better now. She returned to the crawl space the next day and peered through the open hatch, and she said softly, "I'm sorry." That night, the knocks came again. Knock, knock, knock. But this time, Lydia didn't run. She sat on the floor, palm pressed to the wood. "I hear you," she whispered. The knocks stopped and never came again. But sometimes, when she walks through the house late at night, she hears breathing just beneath her feet. Slow, rhythmic, and she wonders if Lillian is still there, not angry, just waiting. Story 3, The Midnight Visitor on the Cabin Door. When my uncle passed away unexpectedly, he left behind a small cabin deep in the Smoky Mountains, one he'd built himself decades ago as a weekend retreat. My family didn't visit it often, but the place was familiar to all of us. Creaky wooden floors, a tin roof that echoed with every rain, and a wood stove that crackled through cold mountain nights. My parents decided to keep the cabin, and since I was on break from college and needed a quiet place to work on my thesis, I volunteered to stay there for a week. I arrived late on a Wednesday afternoon. The air smelled like pine and soil. That remote part of the mountain always felt a little off, like the wind carried something older, something watching. But I chalked it up to the isolation. No phone signal, no Wi-Fi, no neighbors for at least a half mile. It was just me, the trees, and the silence. The first night was peaceful. I made myself some soup, lit a fire, and read until I dozed off in the armchair. The knocking started at exactly 2:17 a.m. It was soft, deliberate. 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. They came from the front door. I sat up, heart pounding. I'd locked the door, I was sure of it, and who the hell would be up here this late? I peeked out the window. Nothing. Just trees swaying under the dim moonlight. I waited. The knock didn't come again. The next day, I walked down the trail that wound through the woods. There was no sign of people. No boot prints, no bikes, no tire tracks. I told myself it was probably a tree branch or some animal. Maybe the wind had loosened something on the porch. That night, I made sure to secure everything. Deadbolt locked, curtains drawn. I kept a fire going longer this time, feeling an odd chill settle through the room, even though the stove was hot. I went to bed early and tried not to think about the knock, but it came again, 2:17 a.m. Knock, knock, knock. Same pattern, same deliberate rhythm. Only this time, it came from the back door. That door hadn't been opened in years. It faced a steep slope surrounded by thick brush and brambles. No path, no porch, nothing a person could easily walk through. I didn't look out. I couldn't. I laid there, frozen in bed, heart thudding against my ribs. It was dead silent after the knock. No footsteps, no rustling leaves, not even the usual chirps or howls you expect in the forest at night. The silence was so complete it hurt. The third night, I stayed up, coffee in hand, flashlight beside me, and a hunting knife I found in the drawer. I positioned myself in the main room with a clear view of both doors. The wind picked up around midnight, howling through the eaves like a dying thing. Then it stopped, completely, and the air felt thick, pressurized, like something big was about to happen. 2:17 a.m. Knock, knock, knock. From the front again, I shone my flashlight through the peephole. There was something standing just beyond the steps. Not quite a person, not quite a shadow either. It was tall, too tall, shoulders hunched, no details, just the shape. It didn't move, it didn't make a sound. Just stood there, still as stone. Then it slowly raised one hand. I couldn't see fingers, but the motion was clear. It pointed not at the door, but at me. I staggered back, heart in my throat, fumbling for my phone out of reflex, even though I knew it had no signal. When I looked back out, it was gone. The next morning, I packed my things. I didn't care if I got my thesis done or not. I needed to leave. But when I turned the key in the ignition, the car wouldn't start. Battery was dead, completely drained. I spent the day checking everything. Wires, lights, anything that might have been left on. Nothing. It was as if something had just sucked the life out of it. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed by the fire, knife in hand, flashlight ready. 2:17 a.m. This time, both doors knocked at once. Knock, knock, knock. Front and back in perfect sync. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But where would I go? Into the woods? With that thing? I stayed frozen, listening as the knocks repeated every 30 seconds. They didn't stop until sunrise. When morning came, my car started on the first try. I drove straight home, white-knuckled the whole way. When I told my dad what had happened, he went pale. He said my uncle once mentioned hearing knocks at night in the cabin, always at 2:17, but he never talked about it more than that. A few days later, I got an email from a stranger. No subject line, no signature, just one sentence. Never open the door, no matter where you hear the knock. I haven't been back to the cabin since, but sometimes, if I'm up too late and the house is quiet, I swear I hear it. Knock, knock, knock. Right on my bedroom wall. Story 4, The Knocking That Knew Her Name. The first knock came 3 days after my grandmother's funeral. It was just past midnight. I had just started dozing off in my childhood bedroom, the one lined with shelves of old dolls and yellowing fairy tale books, when I heard it. 3 soft raps on the window. Knock, knock, knock. I sat up instantly, heart racing. The window was on the second floor, looking out over the backyard. No porch roof, no tree branches, nothing a person or animal could easily reach. I got up, cautiously crept to the curtain and peeked through. There was nothing there, just the moonlight washing the grass in a pale, sickly blue. The night was still, too still, as if the world had paused. I told myself it was the house settling, or my mind playing tricks after a long week of grief. After all, Grandma Ellen had raised me. She wasn't just my grandmother. She was a second mother, a protector, a mystery. She also believed in strange things. She used to tell me stories about the forest people, shadowy beings that lived deep in the woods behind our house, that whispered your name when you were alone. She warned me, often and seriously, if you hear knocking and it speaks your name, do not answer. Not ever. As a child, I laughed it off, but now, curled up in her empty house, the memory wrapped around me like a cold hand. The second night, it came again. Exactly 12:07 a.m. Knock, 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 this time on the door to the hallway. I froze in bed, too afraid to breathe. My bedroom door was shut. I hadn't heard footsteps, no creaking floorboards, just the knock, soft, measured, as if someone was politely waiting. Then I heard it, a whisper, so faint it might have been the wind, except the wind doesn't say your name. Lena. I sat bolt upright. My name, clear as day, right on the other side of the door. I didn't move, didn't respond. Eventually, the silence returned, and I drifted into a restless sleep, still dressed, clutching a flashlight under the covers like a talisman. The next day, I checked the hallway. Nothing seemed out of place. No footprints, no sign of intrusion. But something felt off. The air in the hall was colder than the rest of the house, and the cross grandma had hung above the stairwell was lying on the floor. I tried calling my mom, but the call wouldn't go through. The signal flickered, then vanished. Same with the Wi-Fi. Every time I tried to leave, something would stop me. A flat tire, a dead phone, a sudden storm. It was like the house didn't want me to leave. That night, I slept with the lights on and locked the door. 12:07 a.m. Knock, 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 again on the bedroom door. But this time, it didn't whisper. It called. Lena, let me in. It's Grandma. I need your help. My blood turned to ice. The voice was hers. The same rasp, the same warmth. But something was off. It was too slow, too careful, like someone imitating her through a recording, like a puppet pulling her voice from a dark well. I didn't answer. I barely breathed. It spoke again. Lena, please, I'm trapped. They took me. You have to let me in. I'm cold. I'm scared. Please. Tears welled in my eyes. I wanted to open the door, to believe it. But Grandma was buried in the old churchyard, her casket sealed, the dirt still fresh. Then came the scratching. Long, deliberate scratches along the bottom of the door, like fingernails. Lena, don't you love me? Why won't you help me? You were always my favorite. I chose you. The lights flickered, then went out completely. Pitch black. I sat there, shaking, the whispering voice now circling the room. It wasn't just at the door anymore. It was everywhere. Lena, 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 Lena. I must have passed out at some point. When I woke up, it was morning. The lights were back on. My phone was charging fine. Everything was normal, except for the deep gouges in the wood beneath the bedroom door. I packed my things and tried to leave. This time, the car started, but the radio turned on by itself. No music, just static. Then, through the noise, a whisper. Lena. I drove straight to the church. I needed answers. I needed to feel safe. I found Father Darrell, the priest who had conducted Grandma's funeral. He looked surprised to see me. Your grandmother spoke to me before she passed, he said, lowering his voice. She asked that, when she died, you be given this. He handed me a worn leather journal, cracked at the spine. It was hers. Inside were dozens of entries. Warnings, notes, drawings of symbols I didn't recognize. Pages and pages about the knocking things, beings that linger between worlds who call out to those they want to wear. She wrote about the woods, about nights when something would knock at her window, whispering her husband's voice, even though he'd been dead for years. She said they come when grief is fresh, when the soul is raw. They imitate. They know what to say. The last entry chilled me to the bone. Open quote. I can feel them circling now. They know I'm fading, but they won't get me. I've placed wards in the house, told Lena everything. If they knock and call your name, do not answer. Not even if it sounds like me. It isn't. It never is. Close quote. That night, I didn't return to the house. I stayed in a motel 2 towns over, but I couldn't sleep. At exactly 12:07 a.m., someone knocked on the motel door. 3 soft knocks, then a pause, then, Lena, please. It's Grandma, I found you. Let me in. I didn't answer, but I know it's not over, because now they know my name. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe it was just the house settling. That's what we all tell ourselves when the knocking starts. But when it follows you home, when it knows your name, when it never stops, how long can you keep pretending it's nothing? Some knocks aren't just sounds. They're invitations, warnings, reminders that something out there is watching and waiting. If you ever hear that slow, deliberate knock again, think twice before you answer.